In the bustling streets of London, bargains are found in shops, in markets, and on every corner where a sharp eye might strike lucky. But there is one kind of bargain that is too good, too perfect, and far too dangerous to ever be trusted. When Hercule Poirot first hears of a young couple acquiring a luxurious flat in a fashionable district for a rent so absurdly low it defies reason, he does not smile at their fortune, he frowns. For Poirot knows well that in life, as in crime, nothing is ever truly cheap. Behind the polished doors and velvet curtains, behind the laughter of neighbors and the charm of hospitality, there lies a secret worth killing for. And so begins one of Poirot's strangest adventures, where the price of a flat is measured not in pounds and shillings, but in betrayal, espionage, and the darkest corners of the human heart. It began, as so many curious tales do, with a chance remark overheard in the most ordinary of settings. Hastings and Poirot were dining together in a modest little restaurant tucked away near Leicester Square. The hum of conversation filled the air. Cutlery clinked against china plates, and cigarette smoke curled lazily beneath the soft glow of lamps. Hastings, always fond of observing people, found his attention straying to the lively young couple seated at the next table. The young woman, animated and cheerful, leaned close to her companion, speaking in a tone meant for him, but not quiet enough to escape the ears of those nearby. "We've taken a flat in Montague Mansions," she declared proudly, "and only £4 a week." The words tumbled out with the ease of someone who believes fortune has smiled upon them. Her husband smiled too, though a little more reservedly, as if still astonished by their stroke of luck. Hastings nearly dropped his fork. A flat in Montague Mansions, one of the most desirable addresses in London, for the paltry sum of £4 a week. Unheard of. He knew rents in that district rarely fell below £10 or £12. To secure such a bargain was either an extraordinary blessing or something altogether less innocent. Yet Hastings, ever the optimist, felt no suspicion. To him it was merely a tale worth repeating to Poirot, if only for the amusement of seeing his friend's reaction. When the couple had gone and the restaurant had grown quieter, Hastings leaned across the table with an eager sparkle in his eyes. "Poirot, you won't believe what I've just heard. A young couple has taken a splendid flat in Montague Mansions for only £4 a week. Imagine it! They must be the luckiest pair in London." Poirot set down his knife and fork with deliberate precision, then produced from his pocket the tiny scissors he often used to keep his moustaches in perfect order. He clipped carefully, then raised his gaze to Hastings, his eyes sharp and amused. "Mon ami," he said softly, "once again you show yourself as the eternal optimist. Always you believe in chance, in luck, in miracles. But I, Hercule Poirot, do not believe in bargains. If a thing is too good to be true, it is because, how do you say, it conceals something sinister." Hastings laughed aloud. "Come now, Poirot, you can't mean to suggest foul play and cheap rent.
Perhaps the landlord is generous, or perhaps the flat was long vacant. There must be some perfectly reasonable explanation. But Poirot leaned forward, his finger tapping lightly on the table, as if marking the rhythm of his thoughts. No, my friend, in life there is always a price. If this couple pays only £4 in coin, then perhaps they pay the rest in danger. It is the habit of the criminal to disguise misfortune as opportunity, to dress up peril as luck. Remember this, Hastings, in every miracle, look for the trick. In every gift, ask who profits. That is the way of Hercule Poirot. Hastings shifted uneasily. His friend's certainty, so calm and unshakable, had a way of dimming his cheerful assumptions. But really, Poirot, he protested, what possible harm could lie in a cheap flat? Poirot smiled, the corners of his moustache twitching upward ever so slightly. That, mon cher Hastings, is what we must discover. Already my curiosity is piqued. We shall pay a little visit to Montague Mansions. There, I suspect, we shall find that the walls, however fine, have ears, and perhaps, too, they have secrets that no rent, however cheap, could ever justify. And so it was decided. What to Hastings had seemed an amusing anecdote became to Poirot the seed of a mystery worth unravelling. A flat in a fashionable district, rented for a fraction of its value. What could be concealed within those walls? For Poirot, the adventure had already begun.
The next morning dawned grey and cool, with a faint mist hanging over the streets of London. Poirot, immaculate as ever, in his tailored suit and polished patent leather shoes, declared that they should waste no time in pursuing this curiosity. Hastings, though amused at what he still considered a trivial matter, found himself drawn along by his friend's quiet intensity. He had long ago learned that Poirot's instincts, however improbable, rarely led to disappointment. They took a cab toward Montague Mansions, the fashionable block of flats that had sparked their interest the night before. As the cab rattled over the cobbled streets, Hastings observed Poirot's expression, calm, thoughtful, but with that faint gleam of mischief in his eyes that always signaled a mystery in bloom. "You really believe there is something behind all this? A mere bargain flat?" Hastings asked. "Mais oui, consider, mon ami. In London, where every inch of ground is gold, does one give away lodgings for a song? No. If there is generosity, it is because there is necessity. And if there is necessity, we must ask, why? Who gains? Who loses? These are the little questions, the petite questions that lead always to the truth. Montague Mansions stood tall and elegant, its facade pristine, the brass fittings polished, and the windows gleaming with the quiet pride of respectable tenants. To Hastings, it appeared the very picture of comfort and safety. Yet Poirot, as they entered, ran his eyes up the stairwell and along the tiled floors with the scrutiny of a detective already sensing the first whisper of deceit. He examined the notice board in the lobby, paused before the list of residents, and gave a small nod of satisfaction, as though he had already gathered some secret clue invisible to the ordinary eye. Their first encounter was with the porter, a stout man in uniform whose genial manner could not disguise a flicker of unease at the sight of Poirot's penetrating gaze. Poirot engaged him in conversation at once, inquiring whether the flat recently let had indeed gone to the young couple Hastings had overheard. The porter confirmed it readily enough, though with a tone that seemed almost rehearsed. "Yes, sir. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. Nice young pair, very pleasant. Moved in just last week. Lucky, I say, to get such a fine place for the rent they're paying." "Ah, precisely," murmured Poirot, twirling his moustache. "They are indeed fortunate. But tell me, was the flat long vacant before?" The porter hesitated, just for the briefest moment. Then he smiled broadly and shook his head. "No, sir, not long at all. Just came open, as these things do. Some folks don't like staying too long in one place." Poirot inclined his head politely, but Hastings, watching closely, saw the flicker of triumph in his friend's eyes. Something in the porter's manner had confirmed rather than allayed Poirot's suspicions. They proceeded upstairs, passing doors that opened briefly to reveal curious tenants who peered at the strangers with guarded eyes. Poirot took it all in. The sounds from behind closed doors, the faint aroma of cooking, the hurried hush of a child silenced as footsteps approached. Hastings felt uneasy. Though the building was handsome, there was something in its silence, in its carefully watched corridors, that seemed unnatural, as though every flat concealed not just a family, but a story waiting to be told. When at last they paused outside the Robinsons' door, Poirot did not knock. Instead, he studied the door frame, the lock, even the handle, as though these details whispered truths denied by words. Then he turned to Hastings with a quiet smile. "You see, mon ami, already the mystery grows. A flat too cheap, a porter too quick to reassure, neighbors who watch too closely. I tell you, behind this door lies not merely domestic comfort, but something that will test the little gray cells to the utmost." Hastings, still half amused and half unsettled, could not help asking, "Do you truly believe danger lurks here?" Poirot raised one finger, as though delivering a sermon. "Always, Hastings, when something is too perfect, danger lurks close behind. This flat is no exception. We must tread carefully." And so, in the quiet hallway of Montague Mansions, the first threads of suspicion tightened, drawing Poirot and Hastings into a web which neither yet fully understood, but which Poirot, with the certainty of instinct, already knew to be perilous.
In most buildings, neighbors are a source of comfort. People who nod politely in the corridor, share a word of greeting at the lift, or lend a pinch of sugar when necessity arises. But in Montague Mansions there was a different air entirely, one that Poirot sensed at once. It was not the warmth of community, but the subtle stillness of a stage where every player hides behind a mask. As Poirot and Hastings descended again to the lobby, they passed a woman sweeping briskly outside her door. She was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with a face that seemed to register every movement in the hallway. She looked up just long enough to acknowledge them, then returned quickly to her work. Poirot, however, stopped, inclined his head with great courtesy, and addressed her in his soft, measured tones. "Madame, forgive me. I am but a visitor, curious about this most charming building. You are fortunate to live in such a fine place." The woman gave a tight smile. "Fortunate? Perhaps. though one must be careful here. Too many comings and goings for my taste. People move in, people move out. You'd think no one ever stays long enough to put down roots." Her eyes flickered, as if she had realized she had said too much, and she busied herself again with her broom. Poirot thanked her with a gracious nod, but Hastings caught the glint of satisfaction in his friend's eyes. It was exactly the kind of careless remark Poirot valued, the slip of an honest thought in an otherwise guarded facade. As they lingered in the hall, another door opened. This time it was a tall, well-dressed gentleman with the polished air of one accustomed to command. He greeted them with a courteous bow, though there was a formality in his tone that suggested both curiosity and caution. "Good day, gentlemen. New residents, are you?" Poirot smiled, his head tilted just slightly. "Ah, no, monsieur. Only visitors, but already I see this building is most select. I imagine one must be fortunate indeed to secure a flat here." The man's lips curved faintly, though his eyes remained cool. "Fortunate, yes, though some might say luck has less to do with it than timing. One must be in the right place at the right moment." It was a curious remark, one that hung in the air with the weight of something unsaid. Poirot bowed again, allowing the gentleman to pass without further question, though Hastings could see the wheels of deduction already turning behind his companion's composed expression. Later, outside in the brisk London air, Hastings could contain himself no longer. "Poirot, really, what are you making of all this? Neighbors are always suspicious of newcomers, you know. Surely these small remarks mean nothing." "Nothing?" Poirot raised his eyebrows. "On the contrary, they mean everything. First, the woman speaks of tenants who never stay long. That, Hastings, is most suggestive. Why should people abandon such a fine place so soon unless something drives them away? And second, the gentleman, he speaks of timing, of being in the right place. Do you not see, mon ami, already the language is that of secrecy, of opportunity. These are not ordinary tenants. They play a game." "But what game?" demanded Hastings. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, smiling faintly. "That, my dear friend, is what we must uncover. But mark my words, these neighbors are not what they appear. Each conceals something, and if one listens closely, one can hear the truth leaking through their words like water through a crack." Hastings shook his head, torn between admiration and exasperation. To him, the building seemed much like any other, respectable, quiet, even dull. But Poirot's eyes saw more, always more, until the very air seemed charged with hidden meaning. And as they turned away from Montague Mansions, Hastings realized, with a faint shiver, that they were no longer merely observers of a curious bargain. They had entered a circle of secrets where every neighbor was a player and every word a clue.
It was on a crisp afternoon when Hastings and Poirot returned once more to Montague Mansions, this time with a specific purpose. Poirot, with his unfailing tact, had managed to secure an invitation to call upon the Robinsons, the young couple whose good fortune had stirred such curiosity in his mind. Hastings was, as always, half skeptical and half eager, secretly enjoying the thrill of being ushered into mystery, even when he could not quite see where it might lead. The Robinsons themselves were a pleasant pair, or at least appeared so at first glance. Mr. Robinson, a tall, fair man with an easy manner, greeted them warmly. His wife, slender and dark-haired, smiled with equal charm. Their flat was neat, tastefully furnished, and filled with the sort of cheerful disorder that suggested a young couple still settling into a new home. To Hastings, it seemed the very picture of domestic happiness. Yet Poirot, ever meticulous, saw more. His sharp eyes roamed over the details of the flat, from the arrangement of the furniture to the faint scratches near the window latch, from the locked writing desk to the peculiar absence of personal photographs. Nothing escaped his notice. While conversing politely with Mrs. Robinson about the amenities of the building, Poirot paused to compliment her on the lovely draperies. She flushed slightly, murmuring thanks, though her glance darted to her husband as if for reassurance. It was a small thing, yet Poirot filed it away, as he did everything. To him, every gesture was a piece of the puzzle, every hesitation a whisper of truth. During tea, Mr. Robinson spoke amiably of his work, though Hastings noticed he was vague about the details. He referred often to business, but never once specified the nature of it. Mrs. Robinson, too, when pressed about her background, gave answers that seemed rehearsed, as though she were repeating lines from a play. Hastings, ever the gentleman, would not have thought much of it, but Poirot's keen ear caught the subtle discord, the careful avoidance of particulars that should have come naturally. At one point, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed in apparent relaxation, and remarked with casual elegance, "It is extraordinary, is it not, to find such a flat at so modest a rent? One might almost suspect a miracle." For the briefest instant, Mr. Robinson's hand, steady until then, faltered as he lifted his cup. The tea sloshed slightly, and he laughed too loudly. "Yes, yes, extraordinary luck indeed. We couldn't believe it ourselves. Quite the bargain." Poirot smiled, a smile so gentle it seemed to veil rather than reveal his thoughts. Hastings, however, saw the flash in his friend's eyes, the momentary tightening of his moustache. Something in that reaction had confirmed what Poirot already suspected. When they took their leave, Mrs. Robinson pressed them to call again, her insistence bordering on anxiousness. Poirot bowed gallantly, offering his compliments, but once in the street he turned to Hastings with a quiet intensity. "You observed it, mon ami?" "Observed what?" Hastings asked, bewildered. "The hesitation, the vague words, the absence of personal belongings one would expect in the home of a young couple. These Robinsons, Hastings, are actors on a stage. They play the roles of husband and wife, of tenants content in their good fortune. But I tell you, beneath the performance lies something altogether different." Hastings frowned. "But surely, Poirot, you're not suggesting—" "I suggest nothing. I state only this. They are not what they seem. And if they are not what they seem, then the flat, too, is not what it appears. There is a purpose here, a reason why this dwelling was offered cheaply, and the Robinsons, whoever they are at the heart of it." Hastings glanced back at the building, its windows gleaming innocently in the pale sunlight. Yet even he, reluctant though he was, felt the stir of unease, for the charm of the Robinsons' flat had been touched by doubt, and once doubt enters a home, it casts shadows in every corner.
For Hercule Poirot, suspicion was never enough. A mind as methodical as his demanded proof, and proof, he knew, was best obtained not by chasing, but by luring. As he often said, the criminal, mon ami, will reveal himself if only one arranges the stage correctly. And so it was with the Robinsons and their too perfect flat. He would set a trap, delicate yet decisive, and wait for their masks to crack. That evening, Poirot sat with Hastings in their shared sitting room, a map of London laid out upon the table. Hastings, who was more accustomed to military strategies than domestic intrigue, looked on in puzzlement as Poirot traced small circles around Montague mansions with his fingertip. "Tell me, Hastings," he murmured, "if you were a man wishing to conceal something, say a document, an object of great value, where would you hide it?" Hastings shrugged. "In a safe, I suppose, or in a bank vault, somewhere secure." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. Somewhere one believes to be beyond suspicion. And what could be more secure than a flat occupied by a respectable couple? A flat where, to the casual eye, nothing at all is amiss. A flat where the very ordinariness is the disguise." Hastings leaned forward. "You mean the Robinsons aren't the real tenants?" Poirot tapped his nose delicately. "Precisely. I believe they are but custodians, chosen for this role. The flat is no cheap bargain. It is a cover, a place where something or someone is hidden. And so tonight, mon ami, we shall test the truth." His plan was simple, yet elegant. The Robinsons had invited them to return, and Poirot, ever charming, had accepted. He insisted that Hastings bring with him a small parcel, wrapped innocently in brown paper, as though it contained nothing more than books or papers. Once inside the flat, Poirot contrived, with the utmost politeness, to leave the parcel behind. Hastings, baffled, whispered, "But why? What good will that do?" Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. "Wait and see. If they are what they pretend, they will return the parcel at once. But if they are not, then curiosity will drive them to open it, and in that act they betray themselves." And so, with the trap set, they arrived once more at the Robinsons' residence. The evening unfolded pleasantly enough, with tea and polite conversation. Poirot was his most amiable self, complimenting Mrs. Robinson's taste in flowers, inquiring after Mr. Robinson's mysterious business with all the right touches of polite indifference. Hastings, meanwhile, grew restless, glancing often at the brown paper parcel set discreetly on a side table. When at last they departed, Poirot made a small show of patting his pockets, as though ensuring nothing had been forgotten. Hastings nearly blurted out a reminder about the parcel, but one sharp glance from Poirot silenced him. They left, the package still resting in plain view. Outside, Hastings could scarcely contain himself. "Poirot, really, to leave it behind. It looks careless, even rude." Poirot smiled faintly. "It looks exactly as I intended. Already, Hastings, the play begins." Hours later, back in their own rooms, a soft knock came at the door. Hastings opened it to find a messenger holding the very parcel, from Mr. Robinson, and the man vanished into the night. Poirot accepted the package with a little bow, his eyes alight. "You see, Hastings, they did not open it. Very wise, too wise. They play their part too perfectly, and that is the greatest tell of all. For only those who fear exposure are so cautious." Hastings stared, bewildered.
But if they didn't open it, how does that prove anything? Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers. Because, mon ami, innocence is careless. Only guilt is so exact. The Robinsons are not merely respectable tenants, they are conspirators rehearsing their roles. And mark me, the true secret of the cheap flat lies not in what is visible, but in what is hidden behind its doors.
The days that followed were marked by a curious tension. Poirot appeared more serene than ever, yet Hastings knew that behind that calm exterior, his friend's mind was whirring with possibilities. The Robinsons, too careful by half, had confirmed his suspicions, but proof, as always, remained elusive. And it was proof that came unexpectedly one stormy evening when the tranquility of Montague Mansions was shattered by the arrival of an intruder. Hastings had been with Poirot that evening when a sudden message summoned them to the mansions. A nervous maid from the building, breathless and pale, knocked at Poirot's door with news. There had been a disturbance in the Robinsons' flat. The couple, she whispered, had been seen leaving hurriedly, their faces drawn and anxious. Soon after, sounds of a struggle were heard. Poirot wasted no time. With Hastings in tow, he hurried across the city, the rain lashing against their coats as they pressed forward. By the time they reached Montague Mansions, the air inside the building felt thick, charged with unease. A small group of tenants had gathered in the corridor, whispering in anxious tones. The Robinsons' door stood ajar, a faint light spilling out into the dim hallway. Inside, the flat bore signs of disruption. A chair had been overturned, papers scattered across the floor, a lamp teetered precariously on the edge of a table. Yet the Robinsons themselves were nowhere to be found. Instead, in the corner of the room, a stranger stood frozen, an intruder caught in the act. He was a tall man, foreign-looking, with dark, angular features. His clothes, though damp from the storm, were of fine quality. In one hand he clutched a small leather case, and in the other a revolver that glinted menacingly in the lamplight. The moment he saw Poirot and Hastings, his eyes widened, and he raised the weapon. "Stay back," he barked, his accent unmistakably continental. Hastings instinctively moved forward, but Poirot lifted a hand to restrain him. His voice, calm and precise, filled the room. "There is no need for dramatics, monsieur. We are but visitors, curious as to the noise. Perhaps you will tell us your purpose here, yes?" The man sneered, though his eyes darted nervously about the room. "My purpose is none of your business." He edged toward the door, the case still clutched tightly. But Poirot stepped lightly into his path, his head tilted just so, his gaze sharp as glass. "On the contrary, I think your business is very much mine. You stand in the flat of the Robinsons, yet they are not here. And that case, I fancy, is not yours." The man's grip tightened, his face darkened, and for a moment Hastings feared he would fire. But then, with a muttered curse, he shoved past them both and fled into the corridor, his footsteps echoing down the stairs until they were swallowed by the storm outside. Hastings sprang to follow, but Poirot's hand again restrained him. "No, no, mon ami, let him go. The bird flies to its nest, and we shall follow in due course. For now, let us examine what he leaves behind." The room was still in disarray, but Poirot's eyes fell swiftly upon the detail others might have overlooked. His haste had cost him dearly, for in his flight he had dropped a slip of paper from the leather case. Poirot bent and retrieved it, his fingers lingering on the texture of the fine stationery, his eyes narrowing as he read the words inscribed. Hastings hovered impatiently. "Well, what is it?" Poirot looked up slowly, his expression unreadable, save for the faintest quiver of satisfaction at the corners of his lips. "It is, Hastings, a fragment of the truth, a clue that tells us this is no mere domestic matter, but something far larger, something, I fear, involving secrets of state." Hastings stared astonished. State secrets? But what could such things possibly have to do with a cheap flat? Poirot replaced the paper carefully in his pocket. "That, my dear Hastings, is the question, and it is one to which we must find the answer before others, far less scrupulous than ourselves, choose to resolve it with violence." The morning after the storm, London seemed to breathe again. The sky cleared, the streets glistened with rain, and yet within Poirot's tidy sitting-room the air was thick with anticipation. Hastings paced restlessly, while Poirot, immaculate as always, sat at his desk, studying the slip of paper they had recovered from the mysterious intruder. The fragment was small, torn from a larger document, but its significance was unmistakable. The words, written in French, referred to naval armaments, schedules, and a location along the English coast. Hastings frowned at the foreign phrases, but Poirot's eyes shone with recognition. "This, Hastings," he said softly, "is evidence of espionage. Of that I have no doubt. We are not dealing with a domestic quarrel or a foolish deception. This flat, this absurdly cheap flat, is being used as the center of operations for a spy ring." Hastings stopped pacing. "Espionage? Good heavens, Poirot! That's serious business." Poirot nodded gravely. "Very serious, mon ami. Think, what better hiding place for the most dangerous documents than within the home of a perfectly ordinary couple? The Robinsons are the veil, the mask. Behind them, the machinery of treachery moves unseen." Still, Hastings struggled to make sense of it. "But the Robinsons themselves, do you think they're part of it, or are they simply being used?" Poirot's moustache twitched as he gave a little shrug. "Ah, that is the question. They play their parts too well, which suggests they know more than they let on. But whether they are masters or puppets, we have yet to see." At that moment, a knock came at the door. Poirot rose, smoothing his waistcoat, and opened it to admit Inspector Japp. The Scotland Yard man looked as brisk as ever, though his expression bore the weight of urgency. "Morning, Poirot. Hastings, I've had word from the Foreign Office. Something's afoot. They say sensitive papers have gone missing, naval plans, and that they may be passing through London. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings before answering. "As it happens, mon cher Japp, I believe I do. The cheap flat in Montague Mansions. It is no bargain at all, but the front for a spy ring. We have encountered an intruder there, and recovered a fragment of their operations. You see, we are in the heart of the matter." Japp's eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be damned. Trust you to sniff it out from a bit of rent that's too low. What's your next move?" Poirot smiled faintly. "My next move, Inspector, is to confirm who the players truly are. The Robinsons, I believe, will soon show their hand, and when they do, we must be ready." Hastings, eager as ever, leaned forward. "But how, Poirot? How do you intend to make them reveal themselves?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "By offering them something they cannot resist, a bait of such value that their masters will demand they seize it." He patted his pocket, where the torn slip of paper rested. "This fragment is but a key. The lock it belongs to, we shall use it to open the whole affair." Japp grunted. "You'll need to be careful, Poirot. Spies don't play games. If they suspect you're onto them, you'll be in real danger." Danger? Poirot gave a delicate shrug. It is part of the profession, n'est-ce pas? Besides, it is not I who am in danger. It is the Robinsons. For those who serve such masters are discarded as soon as they cease to be useful. The weight of those words hung heavy in the room. Hastings, unsettled, imagined the cheerful couple smiling at their dinner guests, their laughter concealing dark allegiances. Were they villains themselves, or simply pawns trapped in a perilous game? But Poirot, however, seemed untroubled. Patience, Hastings. Patience, Inspector. The truth, like the seed, must be coaxed to bloom. And very soon, I think, the Robinsons' little garden will reveal what lies beneath its soil. The following days moved with a strange mixture of calm and tension, as though London itself were holding its breath. At Montague Mansions, life appeared perfectly ordinary. The Robinsons went about their business, smiling pleasantly at neighbors, exchanging polite greetings, entertaining small gatherings in their charming flat. Yet, beneath the surface, Poirot knew a current of danger flowed swift and unseen. He began to weave his net with the patience of a spider. Each move he made was deliberate, calculated, and invisible to those around him. He had, as always, a plan that he shared with no one, not even Hastings, until the time was ripe. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Hastings grew restless. "Poirot, forgive me, but I cannot understand your patience in this matter. We know the flat is being used for espionage. We know the Robinsons are somehow involved. Why don't you simply confront them, or tell Japp to arrest the lot of them?" Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingertips pressed together, his eyes half closed. "Ah, Hastings, always you would rush to the end of the story without reading the middle. Arrest them? On what charge? Possessing a flat at too low a rent? No, mon ami, that is not enough. We must not simply snatch at shadows. We must reveal the substance." "But what are we waiting for?" Hastings demanded. Poirot opened his eyes, their dark gaze steady. "We are waiting for them to act. It is only when the spy believes himself safe that he shows his hand. And it is only when he shows his hand that we may close it upon him." The very next day, as though on cue, the Robinsons' behavior shifted. Poirot observed it with quiet satisfaction. Their movements became sharper, less relaxed. Their smiles remained, but their eyes betrayed strain. Visitors came and went more frequently, their manner hurried, their whispers urgent. The air around Montague Mansions began to thrum with the tension of a storm about to break. Poirot, meanwhile, laid his trap. With Inspector Japp's cooperation, he arranged for a certain rumor to reach the right ears, that a courier from the Foreign Office would soon be transporting a complete set of naval documents, guarded but vulnerable, passing quietly through London. It was bait, carefully chosen, too rich for any spy ring to resist. That evening, Poirot and Hastings dined quietly in their flat, but Poirot's manner betrayed his expectation. "Tonight, Hastings, the play will unfold. The Robinsons will make their move, and we must be there to see it." Sure enough, as night deepened, a messenger appeared at Montague Mansions. He carried a satchel across his shoulder, his appearance unremarkable. But Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, fish, Hastings, see how the bait dangles before them." The Robinsons' flat lit up with welcome. The messenger was admitted with all civility. Minutes ticked by. Poirot, Hastings, and Japp, concealed in an adjoining room, waited with taut nerves. The faint sound of voices carried through the thin walls, cordial at first, then lower, tenser, charged with something unspoken. At last, Poirot gave the signal. They moved quietly to the Robinsons' door and pushed it open without warning. The scene that greeted them was startling. The cheerful couple stood stiff and pale, their eyes fixed not on the messenger, but on the satchel he carried. Their politeness had fallen away, replaced by naked hunger, desperation. Poirot stepped forward with perfect composure. "Bonsoir, mes amis. You seem much interested in this satchel, perhaps too much." The Robinsons froze. For a moment no one moved. Then Mrs. Robinson gave a sharp cry and clutched at her husband's arm, while he, his face ashen, tried to speak and failed. Japp's voice rang out. "Right, you two. You've got some explaining to do." The net had tightened. The couple who had played their roles so sweetly were now ensnared, caught between denial and confession, their carefully constructed mask beginning to crack. Poirot, ever calm, looked upon them with the faintest of smiles. "The moment has come, Hastings. The truth is ready to show itself." The Robinsons stood in silence, their perfect mask of civility shattered by the sudden intrusion. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The glow of the lamp seemed to cast long, accusing shadows across the elegant sitting room, making the atmosphere heavy with dread. Mrs. Robinson's hands trembled where they clutched her husband's sleeve, while Mr. Robinson's lips moved soundlessly, as though words had abandoned him. Poirot, ever deliberate, allowed the silence to linger. Then, in a voice calm yet commanding, he said, "Messieurs et madame, the game is over. You have entertained, you have smiled, you have played your little parts with charm, but the curtain falls, and the truth takes its bow." Hastings bristled with impatience, but Poirot held him back with a gesture. He moved closer to the couple, his eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. "You believed yourselves clever, n'est-ce pas? A flat taken cheaply, a place where guests come and go, where secrets may pass unnoticed. But you forgot one small thing. The eyes of Hercule Poirot see what others overlook." Mrs. Robinson's composure cracked. We don't know what you mean," she stammered. "We're just an ordinary couple." "Ordinary?" Poirot's moustache quivered as he gave a small, almost pitying smile. "No, madame, you are far from ordinary. Shall I tell you why? Because no landlord in London, not even the most generous, would part with a fashionable flat for such a rent. It was a lure, a trick, to place you here. You are not tenants, you are agents. And your flat is no home, it is a headquarters." Japp stepped forward, his voice hard. "You'd best confess now. We know what you're up to, and you're not talking your way out of this." But Mr. Robinson finally found his voice. His face was pale, his words defiant. "You can't prove anything. A few suspicions, a scrap of paper, you've got nothing." Poirot's eyes twinkled as he reached into his pocket. "On the contrary, monsieur, we have quite enough.
The torn fragment, the midnight visitor, the satchel tonight. It is all a chain, and every link points to you." He turned to Japp with a slight bow. "Inspector, you may be assured. These are the hands through which the stolen documents have passed." For a moment it seemed Mr. Robinson might attempt bravado, but then his shoulders sagged, and he looked at his wife with a mixture of despair and resignation. She pressed her lips tightly together, her face pale but resolute. Hastings, moved despite himself, murmured, "Poirot, do you think they were forced into it? Perhaps they're only pawns in something larger." Poirot inclined his head thoughtfully. "There is always a master behind the curtain, Hastings. Yes, they may have been pawns, but pawns who traffic in secrets of nations cannot expect sympathy." Mrs. Robinson broke suddenly into sobs, the sound harsh in the stillness of the room. Mr. Robinson placed an arm around her shoulders, his defiance gone. "It's no use," he muttered bitterly. "They've caught us." Poirot regarded them with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Oui, monsieur, and you see, the cheap flat was not cheap at all. The price you pay is greater than gold, greater even than freedom. It is the price of trust betrayed." Japp gave a sharp nod to the officers waiting at the door. "Take 'em." As the couple were led away, their once charming facade in ruins, Hastings turned to Poirot. "It's finished, then?" Poirot, gazing after them, shook his head gently. "No, Hastings. This is but the closing of one act. The true mastermind still waits behind the scenes. But tonight, at least, the Robinsons' play has ended."
The Robinsons were gone, carried off under the firm grip of Scotland Yard. The flat, once full of charm and deceptive warmth, now stood hollow and still. Yet Poirot's eyes, sharp and restless, betrayed that he was not satisfied. Hastings noticed it at once. "Poirot," he said, lowering his voice, "surely that's the end of it. We've unmasked them. The documents are safe, and Japp has them in custody. What more is there?" Poirot's lips curved into that enigmatic little smile Hastings knew so well. The Robinsons, mon ami, were but actors, puppets, dancing prettily for the amusement of their master. Do you not see? It is not enough to cut the strings, we must find the hand that pulled them. Hastings frowned. But who? Who could it possibly be? Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he rose and walked slowly about the flat, as though the walls themselves might whisper secrets to him. At last he stopped by the mantel, his gaze fixed on a small card left carelessly in a dish. He lifted it delicately between thumb and forefinger. "Here, Hastings, is our final clue." Hastings bent over. "A visiting card, but it's only a name." He faltered, his eyes widening. "Yes," Poirot said softly, "a name we have heard before, in connection with other little matters, always discreetly, always on the edge, never quite within reach. A man of society, charming, well-connected, above suspicion. And yet, behind that mask lies one of the cleverest brains in espionage." As if summoned by fate, a knock sounded at the door. Japp entered, his expression grim. "We've been watching the visitors to this flat for weeks. One man keeps turning up, smooth as silk, never staying long. Name of Parker, calls himself a friend of the Robinsons." "Ah, Parker," Poirot said with satisfaction. "So the spider reveals himself at last." They set their trap swiftly.
That evening, when Parker returned, it was not the Robinsons who greeted him, but Poirot, Hastings, and Inspector Japp. Parker entered with a smile, suave and unconcerned. But the moment his eyes met Poirot's, a flicker of recognition, and then of fear, crossed his face. "Good evening, monsieur. Or should I say, good evening, master of puppets." Parker's smile stiffened. "I don't know what you mean. I came to see my friends." "Your friends? Ah, but they are no longer here. You see, monsieur, their performance is over, and now the audience demands the name of the playwright." Japp stepped forward. "We've got enough on you to keep you talking for weeks. Better start explaining." For a moment Parker tried to laugh it off, to maintain his charm, but Poirot's relentless gaze bore into him, stripping away the mask. Slowly his composure faltered. "You fools," he spat suddenly. "Do you think you've won? For every man you catch, there are 10 more ready to take his place. This game never ends." "Perhaps," Poirot replied softly, "but tonight, monsieur, you are caught, and one spider less is always a victory." Parker was led away, defiant to the last, but Poirot did not gloat. He stood in the empty flat, thoughtful. "You see, Hastings, the cheap flat was never about rent. It was about opportunity. It was the stage upon which greed and betrayal performed their little play. And in the end, it is always the same. Crime may act with cunning, but it cannot outwit order and reason." Hastings, still shaken, muttered, "I'll never look at a cheap bargain the same way again." Poirot's mustache twitched, "And rightly so, mon ami. Remember this, when a thing seems too cheap, it may cost you more than you can afford, even your soul."
And so another mystery draws to a close. What began as a simple curiosity, a flat too cheap to be true, unfolded into a tale of espionage, deception, and betrayal. Hercule Poirot has once again shown us that beneath the surface of the ordinary lies the extraordinary, and that the smallest details often hold the greatest truths. Perhaps that is the true lesson of this adventure. In life, as in crime, nothing of real value ever comes cheaply. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of Hercule Poirot. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another case from the little Belgian detective. Until next time, keep your eyes sharp, your wits sharper, and remember, mystery often waits just behind the most ordinary of doors.